When he was like 5 or 6 years old, I just told him in the locker room before we came out, and he was playing on the Little League Tiny Tots league in our hometown of Akron, Ohio. And I think he was like 5 or 6 years old, and he had did something. He had grabbed a rebound and like drove, coast to coast through the lane through a couple of the other kids, and like laid it up and had a little trot back. And I looked over at his mom, and I was like, oh, he's special. Like, he's special. She was like, what? He's 5 years old. Like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I've seen this before. Like, I know I've seen this before. All the way to the point where he gets drafted, and I brought that back to his mom, and she was like, I remember you said that like 12 years ago.
The NBA has seen just about everything over the decades: bad draft picks, questionable front office decisions, and players who stuck around longer than they should have. But nothing in recent memory compares to the Bronny James situation. A 55th overall pick getting opening night minutes. Reports suggesting it was essentially a favor. And a media cycle that tried to present it all as completely normal. It wasn't. So let's be honest for a second, would Bronny James be in the NBA right now if his last name were anything other than James? Strip away the narrative, and the answer becomes pretty clear. He's not here because of elite draft stock. Not because of standout college production. And not because scouts saw something undeniable at USC. Bronny James is in the NBA because of his father.
Team.
Hey, Bronny! Knock down. Great shot.
He's here because LeBron James wanted to share the court with his son. Because of influence within the Lakers organization. And because the league recognized that a father-son storyline had massive promotional value. This isn't a hot take, it's how the situation unfolded. And the people who pointed it out early, who were dismissed as haters or critics, have been validated by everything that's happened since. Let's rewind to where this really gained traction: Summer League 2024. Jaylen Brown, sitting courtside, made a simple observation: he didn't think Bronny was a pro-level player.
A pro.
That was it. Not an attack. Not disrespectful. Just an honest evaluation from one NBA player watching another. But the reaction was immediate and intense. Brown's comment was framed as disrespect. As crossing a line. As something that demanded accountability. Eventually, he walked it back, offering what many saw as a forced apology. And for a moment, it seemed like the situation would fade away.
Our relationship has been, pretty respectful. Besides the shit he said about Bronny at Summer League. But other than that,
you guys were able
but other than that, we've been all right.
Were you guys able to get past that?
We'll be all right.
But it didn't. Even 2 years later, LeBron was still referencing that moment. Still treating it like an unresolved issue. And that says a lot. When something continues to sting like that, it usually means it hit close to the truth. Because across the basketball world, many quietly agreed with Brown's assessment. And that's why it lingered, because it wasn't easy to dismiss. Now, look at the actual basketball. Bronny's freshman year at USC, 5 points per game. On a struggling team. In a weaker conference. He wasn't a primary option. He wasn't consistently impactful. And he wasn't even the best player on his own team most nights. Yet he declared for the draft and was selected 55th overall by the Lakers.
Justified it.
With the 55th pick in the 2024 NBA Draft, the Los Angeles Lakers select Bronny James from the University of Southern California.
Let's put that into perspective. Second-round picks are typically long shots. Development projects. Players who fight for roster spots through training camp and the G League. They don't usually get meaningful minutes, especially not on opening night. But Bronny did. Not because of dominant preseason performances. Not because of a strategic matchup decision. But because the moment mattered more than the merit. The cameras were ready. The story was set. A father and son sharing the court, that was the headline the league wanted. And in that moment, entertainment value outweighed basketball logic. That's when it stopped feeling like pure competition and started looking more like a scripted spectacle.
Ginny Bus crumbled to her board of directors that she thought LeBron James' ego was completely out of control from the day he became a Laker. That LeBron James was not grateful that the Lakers drafted Bronny for him.
Jeannie Buss didn't mean to say the quiet part out loud, but she did. When reports came out that she felt LeBron James wasn't sufficiently appreciative after the Lakers drafted his son, and that the organization believed it had done him a favor, it changed the entire conversation. Because that word favor matters. Teams don't do favors in the NBA draft. Not if decisions are being made purely on basketball merit. Draft picks are investments. Evaluations. Calculated risks based on talent, production, and long-term potential. So when the owner of a franchise frames a draft selection in those terms, it tells you something fundamental. This wasn't just a basketball decision. It was something else layered on top of it: relationships, expectations, and influence. And in that moment, a lot of the criticism that had been dismissed for months suddenly didn't sound so unreasonable anymore. Then there's the clutch sports dimension, something that kept surfacing in conversations around the Lakers during that period. As the agency representing LeBron, its presence within the organization wasn't just background noise, it was part of the environment. There were consistent reports of tension, of internal discomfort, of a feeling that decision-making wasn't operating in its usual structure. When people talked about influence, this is what they meant. Not necessarily something explicit, but something understood. Something felt. A sense that certain moves carried expectations beyond basketball logic. And when you combine that environment with the Bronny situation, it starts to form a clearer picture of how everything aligned the way it did. But the most important part of this story isn't the politics, it's the impact. Because the person who has to live with the consequences of all this isn't Jeannie Buss. It isn't LeBron. It isn't executives or agents. It's Bronny James. He's the one stepping onto the court. He's the one being evaluated. And he's the one carrying a question that follows him everywhere. Did he earn this the same way everyone else had to? That question exists not because of who he is, but because of how he got here. The traditional path to the NBA is built on proof. Years of development. Growth in college or other systems. Gradual improvement that gives scouts and fans something concrete to evaluate. That process builds legitimacy. And in Bronny's case, that process didn't fully play out. That's why comparisons to players like Ron Harper's sons are so important. Ron Harper Jr., for example, took the long road, multiple years in college, steady statistical growth, refining his game step by step. By the time he reached the professional level, there was a body of work behind him. There was no need to debate whether he had earned his opportunity, his progression spoke for itself. That's what the normal system is designed to do. It doesn't guarantee success, but it guarantees that when a player arrives, they've been tested, developed, and evaluated in a way that feels complete. Bronny didn't get that same runway. Not necessarily because he couldn't benefit from it, but because the timeline was different. LeBron James, nearing the end of his career, made it clear that playing alongside his son mattered to him. And that moment, the image of father and son sharing an NBA court became something bigger than basketball. It became a milestone. A story. A historic moment the league could promote and celebrate. But to make that moment happen, the timeline had to move faster than the development curve. And that's where the trade-off happened. You can see the contrast even more clearly when you look at other examples. Take Carmelo Anthony's son, entering college basketball and going through the traditional process, developing his game, building his resume, and earning whatever opportunities come next. There's no shortcut there. No accelerated timeline. Just the system working the way it's supposed to. And whether he makes it or not, the evaluation will be based on what he proves, not on what's arranged. That's why this situation goes beyond just one player or one team. It raises a bigger question about how decisions get made when competing priorities enter the picture. Because in this case, there were a lot of competing priorities. the NBA had a massive promotional opportunity. The Lakers had relationship dynamics to manage. LeBron had a personal goal. Clutch Sports had influence within the ecosystem. All of those forces pointed in the same direction. But none of them answered the core basketball question: was the player fully ready for this level? And when that question doesn't have a clear answer, everything else becomes louder. Every performance gets scrutinized more closely. Every mistake gets magnified. Every success gets questioned. Because the conversation isn't just about what's happening on the court, it's about whether the opportunity itself was justified in the first place. That's a difficult position for any young player to be in. And this is where the earlier comments from players like Jaylen Brown take on more weight over time. At the moment, they were controversial, dismissed, criticized. But as more context emerged, as more moments played out, those comments started to feel less like isolated opinions and more like reflections of a broader reality. Not necessarily harsh, but honest. And 2 years later, the situation hasn't become more confusing. It's become clearer. The language from ownership, the ongoing reactions, the visible gap between expectation and readiness, it all points in the